Welcome to Zero Doubt, Identity Security in a Zero Trust World. In this insightful webinar, Optiv ClearShark CTO and Vice President of Engineering, Brett Hansen, is joined by Senior Director of Zero Trust Strategy, Mark Modisett, for a discussion on how federal agencies can develop tailored roadmaps to strengthen identity security within their Zero Trust frameworks. Their discussion covers practical strategies for navigating the complexities of Zero Trust implementation while maximizing operational efficiency and staying within budget. Whether you're building your Zero Trust architecture or optimizing existing systems, this session offers valuable guidance to help you move forward with confidence.
Hello, and thank you for joining our Identity Security in a Zero Trust fireside chat today. Here at Optiv ClearShark, we believe that nothing should stand in the way of making government more secure. And today we're going to talk about Zero Trust principles and how they can be harnessed for your identity management practice today. And hopefully you'll gain some insights as we talk through the complexities of managing identities and those entitlements across your federal agency. Before we get started, let me introduce myself. I'm Brent Hansen. I'm our CTO and VP of Sales Engineering here at Optiv ClearShark, and have been in the data and cybersecurity market I've been in the market for a very long time, and it's really been insightful over the years, coming out of college and being in the dot-coms and really understanding what technology and what innovation is about. And then you fast forward to where we're at today with AI. It's just been such an incredible journey to go from 0 to 60 in the last 25 plus years, and certainly happy to be here and really looking forward to our discussion. So today I want to introduce Mark Modisett, who's our CTO for Zero Trust here at Optiv ClearShark. Mark, give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Brent. Great being here with you today. I've got over 30 years in information security and in IT. I started my career in the Air Force. When I got out of the Air Force in Colorado Springs, I was kind of during the dot-com era, and I hit the ground running. I was looking for that perfect role. Worked my way through a few different roles. I worked at the Missile Defense Agency in a CETA role. I was also an information security officer at a large credit union in that area. And then I ended up found my way over to Avaya, where I became their CISO. And that was my first global and large enterprise that I was kind of responsible, like one throat to choke for security at Avaya. After Avaya, I left there and I went to work for Microsoft, where that's what brought me to Seattle. That's where I'm out of. Where I was their senior security strategist for their services division. And a lot of the topics that we'll hit today are things that are, little things that I picked up along the way. And those two roles kind of helped form my understanding of identity and really put my tools to the test as far as trying to make sure I was making the right decisions around identity.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. And we've done a number of these fireside chats in the last 12 months, and it's always a pleasure speaking with you. And I always appreciate your perspective, especially being in that uber important role of CISO and all the responsibilities and really managing risk with resources, with limited budget, and ultimately being responsible for the governance and cybersecurity posture of an organization. So in our conversations, and as we always do, I love to start with a state of the union. Where are we today with Zero Trust, specifically around identity? And Mark, I would love to hear your opinion on where we sit, what you observe based on conversations with our partners, with our customers. Where have we come from? Where are we? What's the current state of the union for identity?
Yeah. So I'll say, well, let me share a slide that'll help kind of guide the conversation here. Just give me a sec to get this going.
Perfect.
All right. Yeah. So if you've heard me speak about Zero Trust, you've probably seen me present this slide. But I really like this because it helps kind of set the stage for Zero Trust and a lot of the reasons why we're doing Zero Trust today. But on the left-hand side of the screen, you see the traditional perimeter model. You can use different analogies for this. I've heard a lot of folks talk about the castle and moat, that there's that, moat on the outside, and the bad guys, once they get across the moat or the firewalls, then they're presented with, a set of other challenges to get through in order to, get the crown jewels or whatever their target is. So in that castle and moat scenario, very easy for an adversary to penetrate the outside, and then once on the inside, then they basically can move wherever they want to. You think about if you're using that castle analogy, they get over the moat, they get through the front door of the firewall and IDS, and then they're inside the castle with no doors. So they're just moving around from room to room, bringing fire and swords and arrows and all that stuff with them. So definitely, they are compromising all of those vulnerabilities that are in the castle. And the right-hand side, where we're moving into a more perimeterless security model, and this really, when you look at this diagram on the right-hand side, a lot of the topics that are listed there are based on CIO decisions. They're based on what we're doing in IT. Like we want to permit remote users to come in and do whatever they do to advance our mission. We want BYOD. We want people to be able to bring their own platform of choice, so that they can be more productive, and maybe it's a retention tool. Software as a service, and then also private and public clouds. These are all things that we're making decisions about to make us more efficient. So in the same vein, as we were making ourselves more efficient from an IT perspective, or from a CIO's point of view, we forgot about security. And that's why we've got zero trust today, because security was neglected. We were bolting it on back in the day. And in today's world, zero trust kind of calls us to action to say, hey, we really need to be thinking about security as we're thinking about advancing security. So when you ask me the question, where were we and where are we today? We were in a scenario where we had a lot of silos, where you had a lot of business units that were hiring their own people to grant access to business applications and things like that. In today's world, in a zero trust world, if we had zero trust implemented and it was a healthy program, then we would not have silos. We would have everything centralized. We'd have one identity and access management system, with a list of all the different people, what they need access to, with all their job roles documented and all of that. So that's what we're trying to get to, and that's why it's a little challenging, because there's a lot of work that goes into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I think about zero trust, and you think across federal agencies, the different stakeholders, the different end users, you've got the war fighter, you've got people working at IRS with tax returns, you've got CDC, you've got a number of different agencies that do a lot of different things. But when you look at holistically what zero trust is, it doesn't matter what the end user, what the stakeholder, it doesn't matter what your responsibilities are. It matters that you assume risk, and that you are protecting yourself from the inside out, and that you're able to have a security posture of tools where you've got defense in depth through zero trust, through the policies, through the practices, so that in the event, and if you assume compromise, that you're very quickly able to isolate and remove that particular risk and continue to move forward. But it is a one size fits all. Is that fair to say, Mark?
One size fits all. I would say that it is kind of different for each client in the way that they address the mission, or address the business, whatever terminology they're using. But you know, some individuals or some organizations will have already modernized their identity and access management approach, but they haven't applied zero trust principles. So they're just replaced one system for another that has capabilities, but they haven't turned them on. Maybe they're afraid of rejecting access or doing something like that. But in this world with what the bad guys are doing, I look at the two alternatives. I look at bad guys get in and do bad things, or you turn on a feature. Some people aren't going to like to hear this, but you turn on a feature and maybe it doesn't work the way that you expected it to. So I would say that I would want to probably keep our adversaries away over other things and take the risk.
Yeah, absolutely. And then looking at this illustration with the, of course, traditional perimeter model that was in effect when you and I were in industry coming out of school and starting our professional career. And then you look at the modern day where it's multi-cloud, it's hybrid cloud, it's managing things at the very tactical edge. How do you how do you leverage a modern strategic approach to identity? It's easy when you're onboarding new applications that are cloud driven, that are SaaS driven, but how do you do that when you still and oftentimes still have one foot behind you managing some of those legacy environments that have yet to be modernized?
Yeah,
Does it
yeah,
back?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Great question, and I think yeah, this slide is I think a good lead in or provides some illustration to what I'm going to say next. Um, First, let me level set this diagram. So this is something that I used early in my career to help my leadership understand the importance of having a modernized identity and access management approach. Um, you see here that it's just really built to illustrate least privilege principle and what we call lingering access. But on the left-hand side, you see entitlements, and across the bottom is time. And this is an employee starting day one. You see the employee starts, they start to accumulate access that they need in order to conduct their role. The blue box is policy. That's what they should be staying within that box from an access perspective. And then as you see, as the person starts to, take on different roles or different job duties, their access kind of goes up some. You see they start a new project, and then you see a reorg occurs. Now that access that they had for the new project, they they continue to have that access, and then they get promoted and they get additional access, and they just accumulate all of this access because there's a lack of governance and a lack of process around making sure that they have the right access for the job that they're, for their job duties. Then you see kind of their access roll off. Maybe there was an audit or something like that, but some access is taken away. And then you see this individual leaves the company at the final edge here. And you see they're pretty much staying just hit within policy, and then they start to ramp off. And then there's this, it trails off and continues to go. So what we're saying there is that unless there's some event, there's someone who comes in and says, "Hey, I want to see your orphaned accounts," or you're starting to take a better control of your identities. That lingering access will continue to exist there. That opens up a ton of gaps, and I know that there are several breaches that have occurred that have leveraged orphaned accounts for different malicious uses. So it's something to get control of and to make sure that you're watching.
Yeah, I think when you look at the right side of that illustration and graph, it's those loose ends that oftentimes can be the largest vulnerability that it looks like this account at one time should have been here. It's not being audited, it's not being observed. So then, of course, it can do bad things while not, of course, looking like for that particular role outside of what perhaps that person's function was. And so it does, I think, leave and open a lot of vulnerability. And then when you look at the state of where we're at today, and I know with Doge that there's been a lot of efficiency decisions that have been made across federal agencies. And in no practice, commercial or governmental, I think to people prepare and have these processes for offboarding a lot, meaning thousands of accounts. and doing that with, a short planning period. And so when you're looking at the identity life cycle, and when you look at when there comes a point in time where you take someone's creds and you are offboarding that particular credential, there oftentimes, if not done correctly, you have this tailwind of entitlements that oftentimes is, and I think Excel is continuing to be one of the principles of record for almost everything we do in this modern world. But how and and how do you remediate some of those entitlements that have that tailwind if you haven't really harnessed that modern approach and trusted zero trust throughout your identity life cycle?
Yeah, the business alignment is key to really any security project, but especially when you talk about identity. One of the things that I continue to tell some of our clients is that expect there to be just a different type of project when you start your identity project, because you're going to be working across the business, across the mission, with people you aren't used to working with, and that goes to the security team. So, for instance, they'll be working with HR, they'll be working with people who are in the mission or in the business, just to gather all of the information that they need, that's required in order to build those job roles. And in some cases, you might even have a project team that does consist of people from those different teams that are actually working together side by side to configure these identity systems the correct way. So again, a lot of complexity, a lot of time, a lot of investigative work, understanding what individuals do to contribute to the mission, and making sure that they've got that right level of access. And then there's other things that you need to consider as well. There's a lot of integrations with identity and access management systems. There's PAM solutions that you have to think about integrating for that next level of security. There are other systems such as certificate-based or PKI systems that you need to integrate. It could be that you're looking for different uh, different agents to be installed on endpoints before you permit that system to be leveraged in a network. So a lot of things have to occur correctly in order for this to happen, and that's through APIs and other things in this modernization of security.
Yeah. You mentioned something I want to double click on, which is privileged access management. And I believe that when you're modernizing and you're removing friction and you're centralizing on platforms that help manage that 360-degree view of an identity and their entitlements, when you focus on those privileged access users, it can be a case where you have to slow down to eventually go faster. And of course, when you slow down, you're reducing risk, you're building processes and practices in place to ensure that downstream that you're protecting yourself as you're patching some of those systems, as you're doing things at an administrator level that, of course, if those credentials were in the wrong hands, can certainly lurk for a long period of time before unfortunately being caught and remediated. But in your experience, what are a lot of challenges that you've seen around just implementing PAM and doing it the right way?
Yeah, I've seen privileged access management approaches done different ways. Most of the time that I've seen them done, it's by kind of kludging together systems to just make access more secure. And it was really an effort for me to make sure that my network engineering team didn't have all of those credentials as admin level passwords for switches and routers, and then also that my net or system administrators had separate IDs for their common use everyday access, and then another ID for however they're configuring systems and things like that. But PAM really was built to take kind of that burden away. It allows you to do a lot more than just an identity system. So keep in mind that there are features here that will enable you to do things like session recordings, where if you've got a really critical asset with real important information on it, and you want to make sure that anybody who's touching that system is doing the right thing. Also, to have a recording of what occurred during that session. So if the outcome isn't what you expected, then you could go back and look at the recording and see, okay, he did this, this, and this, and that's where he went wrong. Or there's an attack, and just so happens that it was happening during this person making these changes. Other things that are great about modern privileged access management systems is that integration that I talked about a moment ago. You can integrate these systems together so that when someone is requesting access for privileged access to a system, it could query the ticketing system to see if there's a ticket open with maybe a maintenance window, for a precise time that they should be doing this work, or a change management system with some of the same information. So it's really important for us to think through what is the use case, what do we want to control, what is the risk level that's appropriate for our organization, and that's where, like I said, that business alignment and that risk management come into play, and they're super key to the zero trust implementation. And you don't hear much about those two topics when you're reading through, either the CISA approach or maturity approach, or through the DoD approach. I think there are plans for them to build more guidance on those areas, but for now, we have to think about what are the right things, what should we be doing to enhance our risk management approach, because ultimately the goal isn't to implement zero trust. The goal is to reduce risk.
Correct. Absolutely. And just one last topic around the slide that you're showing. So when you look at the policy, and of course you look where you're out of bounds here in terms of the life cycle of this particular identity, what, in your experience, especially as a CISO and your conversations these days with partners and customers, what are a handful of the absolute non-negotiables when it comes to identity security?
Well, you need to ensure that you've got explicit trust or explicit access, that everybody needs to have access to systems. You don't want the same scenario like we had. COVID is a great example of this. So COVID outbreak occurs. We need to make sure that people have the opportunity to work from home. So we increase our licenses for our VPN. We make sure that our VPNs can take the new burden of having a lot of remote users accessing those systems. And now we're permitting all of these people who are coming in remotely to remotely sit on our network. Hopefully there are controls that make sure that it's an issued system that they're coming from. Otherwise, they're going to be coming in from personally owned systems, which we have no idea of understanding, what state those systems are in. Do they have all the patches that they need? Is there any antivirus included on those? What are they leveraging that system for from a personal perspective? And what kinds of risk are they bringing? And you times the number of remote employees that you have on your network at a given time. So there are different things that we need to think about. And again, that's all about risk management and making sure you've got the right risk management approach for permitting access. But that really comes to mind, Brent, when I think about opening the door and permitting the users to come in that way. Not necessarily a strategic decision, more of a, hey, we've got to get stuff done, so let's quickly make it so our employees can get in and do their work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would add to that discussion, and certainly what we see today, especially with a lot of the recent compromises that have occurred just out in industry, is simple things and the basics, as we've spoken many times over: multi-factor
Oh, yeah.
authentication, and ensuring that you're having that additional level of control around accessing things that, of course, are very sensitive. And you look at ourselves in our own personal lives, and you are much more empowered and oftentimes enticed by your financial institutions, your banks, insurance to really enforce, that multi-factor authentication. So we're seeing that almost become uh, a common practice just among, us as individuals, but particularly in federal agencies where you're protecting mission, you're protecting sensitive, United States citizen data, that it should be a non-negotiable and a de facto standard and used, first, versus perhaps other considerations.
Yeah, exactly. I've got a great, I think a great segue for to further the conversation.
Yeah.
Just if we could talk real quick about like what does good look like? What should we expect from we've got zero trust implemented. We've got our job roles figured out. We have a defined list of all of the users in our network that need access to things. We know what they need access to in order to do their jobs. We know where our crown jewels are. We know where all of our most important data is. We've got visibility in our network. So we're doing all of the things that make zero trust possible. So I'll step you through this. This is an employee day one, what it would look like if you had implemented zero trust. So you've got an ICAM system, right? Or it's not necessarily one single system. It's not even necessarily something you go put your hands on. It might be in the cloud or something like that. But it does have these capabilities. It has identity management capabilities, credential management, access accountability, and potentially federation as well that helps you connect securely to other organizations that you might want to conduct business with directly. And then we've got our personnel information management system, which might be the single source of truth. It depends on the organization, but some say, hey, our HR system is a single source of truth for employees. But sometimes they say, no, our ICAM system is that single source of truth. It depends on kind of a few things. One is like, how do you manage third parties? Also, how do you manage non-human entities? Because those come into play later, right? And then so the user, the first day, they're provisioned. They get whatever method that you have for access, and in this case, it's MFA. So they've been provisioned with MFA. They're good to go. Also important to mention is that in this zero trust environment like this, where zero trust is applied, we also have modernized our systems in a way that we can deprovision users in a quick way as well. So it's not just all about getting them in, getting them access. If there's an event that occurs, like something like what's happened with Doge or what's happened within the federal government, we can also release people very quickly as well. So, and then step 3 shows we're also bringing in the individual's assigned piece of equipment. So we've assigned them a piece of enterprise equipment that has all of the certificates on board. It has also agents that help keep the system secure. So we run a series of checks through this integration with our identity system and our network access systems to make sure that the system meets our compliance standards. And then once they pass that validation test, both from the logon perspective and the endpoint, they're presented with a portal. And the portal is a single sign-on where they see systems that they have that they're able to interact with to conduct their job. So in this case, this individual has access to software as a service applications, on-premise applications, databases, and maybe some Windows or Unix systems. But those would all be listed, precisely in that screen that they have access to. And then if they need some additional access, we've also included in a modernized identity and access management approach, we have workflow. That means that I decided that I need access to something else. It goes out through a ticketing system, maybe logs a ticket. Maybe it's an automated where it just grants the access, or it could even be a case where a human is in the mix to make that decision. So whatever the decision is, it is able to go through this workflow, and that person knows pretty much on the spot whether or not they can access this new system that they think they need access to. Another thing worth mentioning, you see there in that dashed lines, that end user is only able to interact with those systems on the network that they're permitted to access. So they can't do ping sweeps, they can't ping other systems, they can't try to log on to them. They are out there, but they are cloaked from their view. So they can't, like I said, cannot interact with them. And that's where the macro and micro segmentation comes in. And then finally, we have complete visibility and control over the network. So we have this continual validation where we're looking at the user and their behavior. And if anything looks a little off or anything like that, then we might pull back their access or make them re-authenticate. But those are things that we have to think through our risk management approach and through playbooks to say, okay, if this event happens, what do we do next? And that can all be automated, or it can be done in a manual fashion.
This is great, Mark. Thanks for walking us through this. So a couple different questions that I want to drill a little deeper into. And one is the visibility and that user behavior analytics. And you've got privileged users, business users, of course. But when you think about measuring and managing risk and protecting yourself from that insider threat. So I know there are many tools on the market today that can capture what baseline is. And then, of course, be able to identify and show you where there are anomalies or perhaps activities that are happening outside of business hours. But that user behavior analytics, weaving that on top of your identity approach and weaving that into your security, but also into downstream, into capturing logs and those behaviors, I think can, really help bolster that additional optics that I would say the tooling is responsible for versus, requiring human time, human resources, where you've got true integration and orchestration of tooling that works in harmony together to look for those type of things. Um, in your experience, do you feel that those are difficult to kind of retrofit into a modern identity approach, or do you feel that these days they quite seamlessly and elegantly can plug in to look for those user behavior analytics and analysis?
Yeah, I'll tell you just for contrast how I've seen it done in the past, and then I'll talk a little bit about modernizing that approach. So in the past, what we had were different help desks scattered throughout the enterprise. If you had a large enterprise, you'd have people whose job was to come in and grant, maybe one of their jobs, but they would come in and they would grant access to a business related system. And usually that individual would sit in the business. And I think what is kind of scary about that, these silos of identity and access management folks that are sitting within the business, is that their goals are not aligned to security goals. Their goals are more speed to service. Their goals are more to giving generous access to people so that they can get in and do what they need to do right away. And that might be to get more revenue, or it might be to drive the mission forward. And that's understandable, but the problem is, right, is that just like we showed before in that other illustration, folks can start to gather access, and that could be a bad thing. So at the end of the day, if you have people who've been with organizations or enterprises for 20 years, 25 years, and then you say, hey, we're doing a workforce reduction and we're going to let you go, but you have a couple of weeks to wrap things up, that's an incredible amount of risk in an environment. And that's the way we used to do it in the old days. We would get a list of people who were going to be let go. We would get the list that was immediately walked out the door, and we get the list of people who were going to be around for a little while. And we knew that we had to just keep a closer eye or tabs on these folks. And it would be things like I would tell the gate folks, the our guards in the building, say, just be on heightened alert for any activities that might include some sort of a physical attack. Then we would also talk to our SOC and say, hey, here's a list of individuals who are going to be around for the next couple of weeks. Can you just make sure that whatever they're doing is authorized type of work? Now that usually the SOC lead would turn to me and say, Mark, now that I'm not going to have that level of visibility. I'm not going to be able to tell if what work they're doing is good or bad. I don't even have the staff right now to scrape screens through the weekend or at late hours to keep tabs on like what's happening on the network. So if someone comes in at midnight on Saturday and decide to do something malicious, we won't see it, or we'll have a very delayed reaction to it. And then we've got to find out where that event is coming from in the world, or maybe in the United States, depending on the size of the enterprise and if it is a global enterprise. So you've got a lot of challenges in a legacy approach to security. You've got a lot of challenges that you've got to overcome. Now, in a zero trust environment where you've made the investments and you have integration between your different security tools across domains. So you've got device working with identity. You know where your data is. You've got data protections in place. So you're looking at egress and ingress. You're also looking at your workloads and applications, both in the cloud and on-prem. So you've got really good, strong control. So you're able to kind of see folks moving around your network and as they're doing different things. So if I were a CISO today and there was some sort of a workforce reduction that I had to, prepare for, but I had made the investment, I was already, I already implemented zero trust, I would feel much better than I would, of course, with a legacy type of approach, because I definitely would have that behavioral analytics to see, okay, this person's doing something different than they usually do. Logging on from a different location or different time of day, or they've never hit this application before. Now all of a sudden they're logging on to this application and downloading data. So that's the kind of granularity and information you would have at your fingertips in a zero trust environment.
Yeah, I think in looking at this and what you were just talking about, offboarding people, going in reverse order from 7 back to 1. And when you've got zero trust principles applied, how safely and as you go through that and how diligently it can be done to ensure that when you think back to the second slide that you had shown, that you're not having that tailwind of entitlements that continues to be an exposed risk for you moving forward. So it's very helpful to walk forward, but also to think, walking backwards, what does that look like, and how do you do it securely to ensure that the entitlements around identity are shut down. So lastly, I know we're coming up here on time, but I would like to talk a little bit about some of those additives that you can add to your identity strategy, security, and zero trust. And I think it's all around just the threat analysis and feeds that are available, and where to best incorporate those. What have you seen work effectively when you've got those subscriptions and those relationships, and you're incorporating that threat intel into your SOC, and you're cross-pollinating that across.
Yeah. Threat intelligence is, I'll concentrate on the word intelligence. It's just going to help you identify problems that are occurring in your network, both internal and external. So there's even insider threat type of threat intelligence that you can kind of add some color or maybe a better another dimension to the information that you're receiving. So you're already correlating information. You've probably got some AI included in that, and it's pulling out information. But when you've got that threat intelligence as an overlay to that enriched data that you're getting out of your environment, it just helps you make informed decisions much faster. It'll help you understand, okay, this is indicative of a this or that kind of attack, to help you understand better. Is this a cloud-based? Is it on-prem? Is it a Windows or a Unix-based attack? Is it, what application is vulnerable? That kind of stuff. So just really helps you, I think, pinpoint, you know, what might be happening in your network, and does it even look like another type of attack that has happened previously?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And you did mention around AI, and as tools continue to incorporate those capabilities within their own
Yeah.
platforms, it makes us all much more efficient, can help us respond, it can help us with orchestration, and again, make us ultimately more safer at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, that's good.
Okay,
Exactly.
got it, got it. I was just going to ask before we close down today if you had any last parting comments. What are we doing here at Optiv ClearShark for our customers? And maybe you can talk a little bit about our offerings around zero trust assessments. And it doesn't have to be specifically around identity, but I think that would be helpful for our audience to understand, in addition, outside of what we're offering our customers, how we're able to come in as subject matter experts and really help harness, but also expedite their zero trust journey.
Yeah, not every customer is the same, and not every customer is in the same maturity state as, everyone else. So everyone's kind of moving at their own pace. What we find is that what we offer a zero trust maturity assessment, and the maturity assessment at the end of that engagement, our clients get a roadmap. It tells them kind of like, here's a prioritized list of actions that you should take in order to get to the next level of maturity. But I also say it's not just a, run across all the different domains and at the end you get a report. We work with our clients to understand what their real needs are, from a few different perspectives. One is we could be flexible in a type of assessment that we go in for. Like they might say, hey, I'm pretty good in device. I'm pretty good in on automation and orchestration, but I need help with data and I need help with, automation, or sorry, with workloads. We With applications and workloads, we we could do that. We could come in and perform an assessment and give them advice and a roadmap, based on that information. But in addition to that, we also like to take in the information that, our clients are sharing with us. So they might have already started their modernization. So we'll talk to them about, here are some integration strategies that you could leverage. Here are some other tool sets, or here are tool sets you already own that you should just integrate together. So lots of advice that we can offer there from people who've been in the trenches, who have been, doing this for a while. And one last thing I'll talk about is we've added on 2 domains to that approach. So we also add, security program management and risk management. So we'll give organizations good advice around, how they should be measuring risk in their environment, how they should be, talking to their business units and things like that. And in a lot of cases, when we get the right audience for the readout, we're able to illuminate issues in their business alignment approach, and we've seen some great successes there as well.
No, that's great. Well, thank you for that, Mark. So I want to thank everyone for joining our conversation today around identity security in a zero trust world. And if there are any additional comments, we would certainly appreciate that and look forward to the next fireside chat that we have together. Mark, thank you.
Thank you, Brent.